The Mirror of Truths. This is a true story. My name is Diego Castellanos, and what I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago in Monterrey, Mexico. I'm 25 years old, work in IT support for a telecommunications company, and I live alone in a small apartment on the 7th floor of a building that's seen better days. I consider myself a skeptic, or at least I used to be. I'm the kind of person who troubleshoots problems with logic, who believes that every glitch has a code behind it, every malfunction a rational explanation. When my great-aunt Teresa died, she left me something in her will, something with my name carved into it, something she'd hidden for 40 years in a secret compartment I was never supposed to find. I should have burned it the moment I discovered it, should have listened to the cold dread that crawled up my spine when I first touched the leather cord binding it shut. Because now, 3 months later, I can't look at any mirror, not the one in my bathroom, not the black screen of my phone, not even a window at night, without seeing it standing behind me, patient and still waiting for the moment I finally turn around. That first night, I remember the exact smell that filled my apartment's sulfur, and old roses, sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in a grave. I remember the sound of fingernails scraping glass from the inside, soft at first, then insistent, methodical. And I remember the cold, a cold that had nothing to do with my malfunctioning air conditioner. A cold that seemed to emanate from the mirror itself, seeping into my bones, making my breath fog in the middle of September. I told myself it was just the old glass. Antique mirrors do that, right? They warp light, create illusions, make your reflection appear slightly off because the silver backing is oxidized over decades. That's what I kept telling myself as I watched my reflection move half a second slower than my body, as I saw it tilt its head when mine stayed perfectly still. That's what I whispered into the darkness of my bedroom at 2:47 in the morning when the tapping started and didn't stop. Just old glass, just tricks of light. Just my exhausted mind playing games after a long day. That's what I told myself, until it smiled back at me. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was troubleshooting a network issue remotely. My fingers cramping from typing, my eyes burning from staring at command prompts that all blurred together after the 6th straight hour. My mother's name flashed on the screen and I almost didn't answer. We weren't close. Not estranged exactly, but occupying separate orbits that rarely intersected. When I did pick up, her voice was tight with something I couldn't quite identify. "Diego, your great-aunt Teresa passed away last night. The funeral is Saturday, but we need to start clearing out her house. You're coming to help." It wasn't a question. My mother, Carmen, didn't ask for things. She informed you of your obligations and expected compliance. I thought about the server migration I was supposed to oversee, the weekend I'd planned to spend doing absolutely nothing, maybe finally getting around to the laundry that had been piling up for 2 weeks. "Mom, I don't know if I can—" "You're the only grandson. Your cousins all have families. It's decided." She hung up before I could protest further, leaving me staring at my phone screen, at my own face reflected in the darkened glass. For just a moment so brief, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. My reflection's eyes seemed to linger on mine even after I'd looked away. I hadn't seen Aunt Teresa in 5 years, not since my grandfather's funeral when I was 20. She'd been a shadow at that gathering, a small woman in black who'd stood apart from the rest of the family, her face obscured by a vintage veil, her hands encased in black lace gloves despite the July heat. I remembered approaching her, some vague childhood memory pulling me toward her, and she gripped my wrist with surprising strength, her fingers cold, even through the fabric. "Diego," she'd whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. "Promise me something. When I'm gone, don't touch anything in my bedroom. Don't open the drawers. Don't look in the corners. Some things should stay hidden even from family, especially from family." I'd nodded, unnerved by the intensity in her roomy eyes, and she'd released me, turning away as if I'd already ceased to exist. I'd forgotten that moment until my mother's call brought it rushing back, along with a visceral unease I couldn't explain. Saturday arrived wrapped in unseasonable cold and the threat of rain that never quite materialized. I drove the 40 minutes to Aunt Teresa's house on the outskirts of the city where the neighborhoods thinned out and gave way to older properties surrounded by high walls and overgrown gardens. The house itself was a relic from another era colonial architecture gone to seed, painted a faded yellow that had probably been cheerful once, but now looked jaundiced in the gray morning light. The smell hit me the moment my mother unlocked the heavy wooden door, dried herbs and mildew dust, and something else, something organic and faintly sweet that made my stomach turn. The interior was dim despite the daylight outside, heavy curtains blocking most of the windows, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw why we'd been summoned. Aunt Teresa had been what people politely call a collector and what others might call a hoarder of the peculiar. Every surface held something: bottles of dried plants with handwritten labels in Spanish, so archaic I could barely read them, photographs of people no one in the family recognized, religious icons that seemed to belong to no denomination I knew. But what caught my attention immediately were the mirrors. 14 of them I counted, of various sizes and ages, hanging on walls or propped against furniture, and every single one was covered with white cloth, the fabric yellowed with age and dust, carefully draped so that not a sliver of reflective surface showed through. "Don't touch those," my mother said sharply when she saw me reaching toward one. Her voice had an edge I rarely heard, something almost like fear. "Your aunt had very specific instructions about the mirrors. They stay covered." "Why?" She didn't answer, just turned away and began sorting through a stack of papers on a side table, her movements stiff with tension. My cousin Daniela arrived an hour later with her husband, their voices too loud in the hushed atmosphere of the house, debating what might be valuable, what could be sold. Daniela had always believed Aunt Teresa was wealthy, hiding money somewhere in this decaying house, and her disappointment was palpable when my mother explained that there was no fortune, just a house full of strange objects and unpaid utility bills. I was assigned to clear out the bedroom, a small space at the back of the house that smelled overwhelmingly of dried roses and something else, something I couldn't identify, but that made the hair on my arms stand up. The bed was narrow, almost monastic, covered with a thin blanket despite the room's chill. No family photographs decorated the nightstand, only a small statue of a saint I didn't recognize, its face worn smooth by decades of touch. The dresser dominated one wall, solid oak, probably from the 1940s, with elaborate carvings of roses and thorns covering its surface. The drawers were heavy, filled with clothing that hadn't been fashionable in half a century. Everything meticulously folded and smelling of mothballs and lavender. I was methodically emptying the third drawer when I noticed something odd about the sound it made when I knocked on the bottom. Not the solid thunk of wood against wood, but a hollow echo that suggested empty space beneath. I should have walked away. I should have remembered Aunt Teresa's warning, should have felt the wrongness radiating from that drawer like heat from a furnace. But curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when you're a person who solves problems for a living, who can't resist the urge to discover what's hidden. I used a pocket knife to pry at the edges of the drawer's false bottom, and after several minutes of careful work, the wooden panel lifted free. In the hidden compartment beneath lay a single object wrapped in red velvet and bound with a leather cord. The leather was old, cracked in places, and burned into it in careful script was a message that made my hands shake. Para Diego Castellanos no abrir hasta mi muerte. For Diego Castellanos, do not open until my death. Beneath this, in the same careful hand, a smaller note on yellowed paper: Perdóname, sobrino, no tuve otra opción. Forgive me, nephew, I had no other choice. I sat back on my heels, the wrapped object heavy in my hands, my mind racing. How long had Aunt Teresa kept this here? How had she known she would die before I found it? And why had she chosen me? I barely knew her. Had only a handful of memories of a distant, unsettling woman who'd always seemed to exist in the margins of family gatherings. From the front of the house came the sound of my mother and Daniela arguing about a set of china, their voices rising and falling in waves of frustration and barely suppressed grief. The smart thing would have been to show them what I'd found, to let my mother explain whatever strange legacy Aunt Teresa had left behind. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the possessive weight of that message, my name carved into leather like a claim of ownership. Or maybe it was just the reflexive secrecy of someone who'd spent too long living alone, keeping his own counsel. I slipped the wrapped object into my backpack and continued clearing the dresser, as if nothing had happened, my heart beating too fast, a prickling sensation between my shoulder blades as if someone was watching me from a corner I couldn't quite see. The afternoon dragged on, the house yielding its secrets, slowly more dried herbs, more photographs of strangers, a collection of books in Latin that none of us could read. Daniela grew increasingly frustrated, her earlier energy giving way to sullen silence, as it became clear there was nothing of monetary value here, just a life's accumulation of objects that meant something only to the woman who'd owned them. By 6 o'clock, the gray day had darkened into evening, and rain finally began to fall, fat drops that drummed against the tile roof and turned the overgrown garden into a blur of shadows. My mother decided we'd done enough for one day, that we'd return tomorrow to finish. As we prepared to leave, I made the mistake of glancing at one of the covered mirrors as we passed through the living room. The white cloth had slipped slightly, just a finger's width, and in that narrow band of exposed glass I saw something that couldn't be right. The room behind me was empty. My mother and Daniela had already gone outside to their cars, but in the mirror, barely visible in the dim light, was a figure. Just a shape, nothing more, but it was too tall and too still to be a trick of the fading daylight, and it was looking directly at me. I stopped walking. The figure didn't move. For 3 heartbeats, maybe 4, we regarded each other, me, and this impossible reflection of something that wasn't there. Then my mother called my name from outside, impatient to be gone from this place, and when I blinked and looked again, the mirror showed only empty room, only the gathering darkness of evening. "Coming!" I called back, my voice not quite steady, and I left Aunt Teresa's house without looking back, the wrapped object in my backpack suddenly feeling much heavier than it had before, as if it had gained weight from that brief glimpse of something that should not have been watching me from glass. The drive home took longer than usual. Saturday evening traffic, an accident on the main boulevard that backed everything up for miles. By the time I reached my apartment building, my shoulders ached from tension I hadn't realized I was carrying, and my hands were cramped from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The elevator was broken again. It had been more out of service than functional since I'd moved in 2 years ago, so I climbed the 7 flights of stairs, each step echoing in the concrete stairwell, the fluorescent lights flickering in a way that made the shadows jump and dance. My apartment welcomed me with its usual neglect: dishes in the sink from 3 days ago, laundry forming small mountains on the floor, the recycling bin overflowing with energy drink cans and takeout containers. I'd let things slide these past 2 months, ever since Anna had gone missing. Not disappeared in the mysterious sense, she'd simply stopped answering my calls one day, stopped showing up to our usual coffee dates, and when I'd finally worked up the courage to go to her apartment, her roommate told me she'd moved out, suddenly left no forwarding address, said something about needing a fresh start. The roommate's eyes had been strange when she'd said it, unfocused, as if she was reading from a script she didn't quite remember learning. I'd filed a missing persons report anyway, but the police had been unhelpful. Adults have the right to disappear, they'd said, especially when there's no evidence of foul play. Maybe she just needed space from you, one officer had suggested with poorly concealed condescension. I tried not to think about it, tried to lose myself in work and video games and the comfortable numbness of routine, but the apartment felt different now, emptier in a way that had nothing to do with her absence and everything to do with the questions that had no answers, the not knowing that ate at me in the small hours of the morning when sleep wouldn't come. I dumped my backpack on the kitchen table and went to take a shower, letting the hot water wash away the dust and the smell of Aunt Teresa's house, trying to convince myself that the shadow in the mirror had been nothing more than my tired mind conjuring fears out of reflected light. By the time I emerged wrapped in a towel, steam fogging the bathroom mirror, I'd almost succeeded in believing it. Almost. The apartment had that particular silence that comes with living alone, the kind where you become hyper-aware of every creak of the building, settling every distant sound of neighbors through two thin walls. I pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt and stood in my small kitchen staring at my backpack at the bulge where the wrapped object rested against my laptop and work files. The rational part of my brain told me to leave it alone until morning to get some sleep and deal with whatever Aunt Teresa had left me when I was rested and clear-headed. But curiosity gnawed at me, and beneath that something else, a strange pull as if the object itself was calling to me, demanding attention. It was 11:30 when I finally gave in, pulling the wrapped bundle from my backpack and setting it on the kitchen table under the harsh LED light. Up close, the red velvet was worn thin in places, and the leather cord that bound it shut had been tied with the kind of knot that spoke of finality, of something meant to stay closed. My fingers hesitated on the cord, Aunt Teresa's warning echoing in my memory. Don't touch anything in my bedroom. Don't open the drawers. But she'd meant for me to have this. She'd carved my name into the leather, had written that cryptic apology. Whatever this was, it was mine now, part of whatever strange inheritance she'd left behind. I pulled the cord free and unwrapped the velvet. The mirror was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 15 centimeters across, the kind of hand mirror that women in old movies used for applying makeup. The frame was brass gone dark with age, ornate with carved vines and roses that twisted around the edge in a design that seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at it. The back of the mirror bore an inscription in flowing script, Espejo de Verdades, 1847, Mirror of Truths, 177 years old. I turned it over to look at the reflective surface, and for a moment, just a fraction of a second, the mirror showed nothing. Not darkness, not my reflection distorted, but actual nothing, as if the surface wasn't glass at all, but a window into empty space. Then my face resolved, appearing slowly as if developing like an old photograph, and I was looking at myself in the harsh kitchen light, tired eyes and unshaven jaw and hair still damp from the shower. I told myself it was just the antique glass, the silver backing compromised by age. The delay had been my imagination exhaustion playing tricks. I set the mirror on the table face down this time, suddenly uncomfortable with the idea of it watching me, and went to get a glass of water. My throat was dry, my pulse elevated for reasons I couldn't quite name. When I came back to the table, I picked up the mirror again, examining the frame more closely. The metal was cold, colder than it should have been after sitting in a warm kitchen, and as I held it, I felt something else, a faint vibration so subtle I almost missed it, like a phone set to silent receiving a call. I should have stopped there. Should have wrapped it back up, put it away, dealt with it in daylight surrounded by people. But I didn't. I turned it over one more time, looked into the reflective surface, and watched my reflection lag behind my movements by half a second that felt like an eternity. My hand moved. My reflection's hand followed a heartbeat later. I tilted my head. My reflection mirrored the motion with that same tiny gap, like a video call with poor connection. My engineering mind cataloged possible explanations, unusual glass composition tricks of refraction, optical illusions created by antique manufacturing techniques. But my gut, the primal part of the brain that evolution had honed over millions of years to recognize danger, was screaming at me to put the mirror down, to get it out of my apartment, to throw it away or bury it or do anything except keep looking into its cold surface. I compromised with myself. I'd keep the mirror, examine it more carefully tomorrow. In better light, maybe take it to an antique dealer who could explain the odd properties. For now, I'd put it away and get some sleep. I was exhausted, stressed from the day, grieving in my own inadequate way for an aunt I'd barely known. Everything would make more sense in the morning. I carried the mirror to my bedroom and set it on the nightstand, face turned toward the wall. Then I climbed into bed, set an alarm for 9 tomorrow was Sunday. No work, and turned off the light. The apartment settled into darkness, broken only by the amber glow of streetlights filtering through my window, and I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come. That's when the tapping started. Talk, talk, talk. Soft at first, barely audible over the ambient noise of the building water in pipes, the hum of other people's air conditioners, the distant sound of traffic. I opened my eyes, listening, trying to locate the source. Talk, 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 the bathroom. It was coming from the bathroom, no more than 3 meters from where I lay. I pushed back the covers and sat up, my heart rate already elevated, telling myself it was just the pipes. Old buildings made noise, water hammer, thermal expansion, settling of concrete and steel. Nothing supernatural, nothing to worry about. Talk, talk, talk. But pipes didn't tap in groups of 3 with that deliberate rhythmic quality, like someone knocking politely, waiting to be acknowledged. I stood and padded across the cold tile floor to the bathroom. The door was ajar the way I always left it, and beyond I could see the faint outline of fixtures in darkness. I pushed the door fully open and reached for the light switch. The fluorescent tube flickered twice before catching, flooding the small space with harsh white light. Everything looked normal, toothbrush and its cup towel hanging crooked on the rack, water stains on the mirror I'd been meaning to clean. I stood there listening, counting my heartbeats, waiting. Nothing. Just the hum of the light and distant plumbing. I was turning to go back to bed when I noticed a condensation on the mirror. Not unusual after a shower, except I showered hours ago, and the bathroom had been dry when I'd brushed my teeth before bed. Now the glass was fogged with moisture-fresh droplets forming and running down in clear trails. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw them lines in the condensation, deliberate marks, as if someone had dragged fingers through the fog. Not random patterns, but shapes that might have been letters in an alphabet I didn't recognize. As I stared, trying to make sense of them, another drop formed at the top and rolled down, and for just a moment before the water destroyed the marks, I could have sworn they spelled my name. My hand was reaching for the towel when I saw my reflection in what remained of the clear glass, and something about it was wrong. The angle wasn't quite right, or the lighting, or something I couldn't name, but felt in my bones. My reflection was looking at me with an expression I wasn't making, with eyes that held knowledge I didn't possess. I wiped the mirror quickly, the towel coming away cold and damp. And when the glass cleared, there was just me, ordinary Diego, with tired eyes and growing unease. Nothing wrong, just imagination in late hours conspiring to unnerve me. I went back to bed, pulled the covers up, and turned to face the wall, away from the nightstand where the mirror sat with its face hidden. Sleep came eventually, thin and restless, full of half-formed dreams that dissolved the moment I tried to grasp them. I woke Sunday morning to gray light and the sound of rain against the window, the storm that had threatened yesterday finally arriving. My head ached dully and my mouth was dry. The mirror sat on the nightstand exactly where I'd left it, innocent, and still just an antique object with no more power than I chose to give it. Daylight made everything feel manageable. I made coffee, ate yesterday's leftover pizza for breakfast, tried to convince myself that last night had been exhaustion and stress manifesting as anxiety. The tapping had been pipes. The condensation had been residual humidity. My reflection, looking strange, had been nothing more than poor lighting and an overactive imagination. I spent the morning working on a freelance coding project, trying to make progress on a website redesign I'd promised to deliver by next week. But concentration eluded me. My eyes kept drifting to the bedroom doorway, to where I could just see the edge of the nightstand, the corner of red velvet where I'd partially rewrapped the mirror. By noon I gave up on work and did something I rarely did. I called my mother on a weekend. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "Diego, is something wrong?" The mirror, I said without preamble. The one from Aunt Teresa's house. What do you know about it? Silence on the other end long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then, carefully, what mirror? Don't. Please don't lie to me. I found it in her bedroom in a hidden drawer. It had my name on it, Mom. She left it for me specifically. You knew about the mirrors. I saw your face yesterday when you told me not to touch them. What are they? Another pause, and when my mother spoke again, her voice had changed, gone flat and hard with something that might have been fear or resignation. Where are you? Home, in my apartment. Is it with you, the mirror? Yes. Have you looked into it? The question was so specific, so pointed that it confirmed what I'd been suspecting. Yes, why? What's wrong with it? Diego listened to me very carefully. Her voice was urgent, now stripped of its usual composure. I need you to cover that mirror with something dark and thick, a towel, a blanket, anything that blocks all light. Do it now while I'm on the phone. Don't look at it again. Mom, you're scaring me. What is it? What did Aunt Teresa do? Cover it first. Then I'll explain. Please, Hijo. I set the phone on speaker and went to the bedroom, grabbed a dark t-shirt from my laundry pile. The mirror was still face down on the nightstand, but as I reached for it, I felt that same cold radiating from it, that same faint vibration. I wrapped the t-shirt around it without turning it over, without letting myself see the reflective surface, and only when it was completely covered did I pick up my phone again. It's covered. Now tell me what's going on. My mother's exhale was shaky. I need to see you tonight. There are things I can't explain over the phone, and you need to understand what you're dealing with. But first you need to know one thing. Don't uncover that mirror. Don't look into any mirrors in your apartment. Don't look at reflective surfaces, windows at night, phone screens, anything that could show you your reflection. Can you do that for me until we talk? That's insane. How am I supposed to? Diego. Her voice cracked. I'm begging you, whatever you saw in that mirror, whatever made you call me, trust that instinct. Something is very wrong, and I need time to explain it properly. Can you come to Aunt Teresa's house tonight, 9 o'clock? Why there? Because that's where it started, and that's where we might be able to end it. Will you come? Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was ridiculous, that my mother was overreacting to what was probably just an antique with some quirky optical properties. But the fear in her voice was real, more real than anything I'd heard from her in years. I'll be there, I said finally. Thank you. And Diego, be careful. If you start seeing things, hearing things, feeling like you're being watched, get out. Go somewhere public. Don't stay alone. She hung up before I could ask what she meant by seeing things, leaving me standing in my bedroom with a wrapped mirror in my hands, and the growing certainty that whatever Aunt Teresa had left me was far more than just a family heirloom. The afternoon passed with agonizing slowness. I tried to follow my mother's instructions, but avoiding my own reflection in a modern apartment was nearly impossible. Every turned-off screen became a dark mirror. Every window, as the day faded, showed my ghostly image against the rainy cityscape. I found myself moving through my own home with eyes averted, gaze fixed on floors and walls, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. Around 5 o'clock, as darkness began to fall early under the heavy clouds, I noticed the temperature dropping. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if someone had opened a freezer door. My breath began to fog. The windows started to frost at the edges despite the rain still falling outside. I checked the thermostat. It read 22 degrees Celsius, perfectly normal, but my apartment felt like it was near freezing. I put on a sweater, then a jacket, and still I shivered. That's when I heard a sound from the bedroom. Not tapping this time, but something worse, a voice soft and feminine speaking words I couldn't quite make out. I stood frozen in the kitchen listening, and the voice came again clearer now. Diego. My name drawn out like a sigh, like a caress, like a threat. I should have left then, should have grabbed my keys and run, but instead I found myself walking toward the bedroom drawn by horrified curiosity, needing to know what was making that sound. The bedroom was empty, of course. Just my unmade bed and cluttered nightstand, and the mirror still wrapped in my t-shirt exactly where I'd left it. But the voice came again, definitely emanating from the nightstand, from the covered mirror. "Diego, I can help you. I can tell you where she is." She. There was only one she that would make me stop, make me listen, make me consider doing the exact thing my mother had warned me not to do. "Anna," my voice came out as a whisper. "She's here, with us. She's been here for months calling for you, but you couldn't hear. The mirror is a door, Diego, a threshold, and she's on the other side waiting." My hand was reaching for the wrapped mirror before I consciously decided to move some desperate part of me, willing to believe anything if it meant finding Anna, if it meant understanding what had happened to her. My fingers touched the fabric. The apartment lights went out. All of them, simultaneously plunging me into darkness, broken only by the faint gray light from the rain-obscured windows. And in that darkness, I saw them reflections with no source, dozens of them floating in the air around me like screens suspended in void. In each one a different scene: Aunt Teresa performing a ritual, 6 strangers with empty eyes, a young woman who looked like Anna, but wrong, somehow distorted, trapped behind glass that rippled like water. Then the lights came back on and the visions vanished. I was standing in my bedroom, hand still touching the wrapped mirror, my heart hammering so hard I felt dizzy. On my palm, where I'd touched the fabric, was a mark, not a burn exactly, but something like frostbite, white and numb, in the perfect shape of a handprint that wasn't mine. Something had reached through the fabric and touched me back. I stumbled backward, away from the mirror, away from the nightstand, and didn't stop until my back hit the bedroom wall. The mark on my palm was already fading color and sensation returning, but the memory of that touch remained cold, beyond cold, and beneath the cold hunger. I grabbed my phone, not looking at the black screen, keeping my eyes averted, and called my mother back. "I'm coming now," I said when she answered. "I can't wait until 9. Something's happening and I need answers." "What did you do?" There was no accusation in her voice, only weary recognition. "Did you uncover it?" "I almost did. I didn't, but Mom, it spoke to me. It said Anna was trapped, that the mirror was a door. Is that possible? Could Anna be—" I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the possibility that my missing girlfriend might be connected to whatever curse or magic or insanity had infected my great-aunt's house. "Come now," my mother said. "I'll meet you there. And Diego, bring the mirror. We can't leave it in your apartment. It needs to go back where it came from." The drive to Aunt Teresa's house took 40 minutes through rain-slicked streets and Sunday evening traffic. I put the wrapped mirror in my backpack, then put the backpack in the trunk as much distance as I could manage while still transporting it. Even so, I felt its presence during the entire drive, a cold weight pulling at my awareness, like a black hole pulling at light. Twice during the drive I caught movement in my rearview mirror, shadows that shouldn't have been there, shapes that didn't correspond to the cars behind me. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to look, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My mother's car was already parked outside Aunt Teresa's house when I arrived. The yellow facade looked worse in the rain paint, peeling windows dark. The house of a dead woman empty and waiting. My mother stood under the small overhang by the front door, and when she saw me, her face sagged with what might have been relief or might have been resignation. "You brought it?" she asked as I approached. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She unlocked the door and we went inside together, into the smell of herbs and decay, into the darkness barely held back by the lamp she'd left burning in the front room. "We need to go to the basement," she said. "That's where she did it. That's where the others are." "Others?" "The other 6 mirrors. The ones that match yours. You're holding the 7th, Diego, the one that was never supposed to be filled." She led me through the house, past the 14 covered mirrors on the walls. I noticed now that some of the cloths had slipped, showing slivers of reflective surface. And in each sliver I saw suggestion of movement of faces that weren't ours, to a door in the kitchen that I hadn't noticed yesterday. This door was different from the others, older, with symbols carved into the wood frame that might have been decorative or might have been something else entirely. My mother produced a key and unlocked it, revealing stairs descending into darkness. She flipped a switch, and fluorescent lights flickered to life below, illuminating concrete walls and the bottom of a staircase that looked steep and uninviting. Everything your aunt became, everything she did that was terrible and desperate and wrong, it all started down there. I found her there once when I was 19 and too curious for my own good. What I saw that night, she shook her head. I made her promise to stop, to never finish what she'd started. But I think she lied to me. I think she kept trying, kept looking for the one last thing she needed, and I think she found it. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw in her eyes the weight of decades of guilt and fear and secrets kept too long. I think she found Anna. The words hit me like a physical blow. What are you saying? Are you saying Aunt Teresa kidnapped my girlfriend? That she did something to her? I'm saying we need to go down there and look at the other 6 mirrors. I'm saying that you need to understand what your aunt was trying to do before you make any decisions about what happens next. And I'm saying that whatever we find, whatever truth is waiting in that basement, our lives are never going to be the same after we learn it. She started down the stairs, not waiting for my agreement, and after a moment's hesitation I followed the backpack with its terrible burden heavy on my shoulders, each step downward feeling like a step away from the rational world I'd always inhabited and into something older, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. At the bottom of the stairs I understood why my mother's voice had been so grim. The basement had been converted into something between a chapel and a laboratory, with none of the comforting associations of either. The concrete floor was covered in symbols painted in what looked like dried blood circles and stars, and characters from alphabets I didn't recognize, all interconnected in patterns that hurt to look at, that made my eyes slide away even as I tried to focus. In the center of this painted mandala was a stone altar, ancient and pitted, stained dark with substances I didn't want to identify. And on the wall opposite the stairs, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 alcoves carved into the concrete. 6 of them held mirrors identical to mine, brass frames carved roses, inscriptions reading Espejo de Verdades, followed by dates. The 7th alcove was empty, waiting, but it was what I saw in the 6 mirrors that made my blood run cold. Each one showed not a reflection of the basement, but something else, a different place, a different darkness, and trapped in each darkness was a person. Not quite corpses, not quite alive, translucent, ghostly, but aware. 6 people staring out from 6 mirrors, and all of them were looking at me with expressions of desperate hope mixed with terrible warning. "Your aunt," my mother said softly, standing beside me, "was trying to bring back a man named Mateo who died in a car accident in 1984. They were lovers in secret. He was married, had a family, and when he died, she couldn't accept it. She found someone in the mountains, a woman who knew old magic from before the church came, before the Spanish came. This woman gave her 7 mirrors and told her how to use them. She pointed to the 6 filled alcoves. Each mirror can trap a person's reflection, not just their image, but their shadow self, the part of them that exists in the space between worlds. 7 reflections. 7 souls could be traded for 1 life returned. But the ritual had rules. It had to be done over 7 nights during a dark moon. Each person had to consent even if they didn't understand what they were consenting to. And all 7 had to be completed before the trade could be made. "She got 6, I said, understanding beginning to dawn with sickening clarity. "She got 6. On the 7th night, I interrupted her. I was staying here, couldn't sleep, saw the light from the basement. When I came down, she was in the middle of the binding ritual with the 7th person, a young woman from the city who'd come asking about herbal remedies. The woman was standing in front of that empty alcove, looking into the mirror, and I saw her reflection starting to separate from her body, saw it being pulled into the glass. My mother's voice broke. I screamed, knocked over the candles, broke the circle. The woman ran confused and terrified. The ritual failed. Mateo didn't come back. The 6 people already trapped stayed trapped, and Teresa, your aunt, aged 20 years in a single night. Her hair went white, her face collapsed. The incomplete ritual drained her life force and gave nothing in return. So for 37 years she kept them prisoner, I said, looking at the 6 ghostly figures in their glass cages. 6 people she destroyed for a love that was never going to come back, until she died, and the binding started to weaken. That's why the mirrors are acting up, why they're reaching out trying to find new vessels or trying to escape. Without her there to maintain the spell, they're getting stronger every day. I pulled the wrapped mirror from my backpack and unwrapped it, slowly revealing the brass frame and its inscription. In this mirror there was no reflection of the basement. Instead, I saw a young woman's face, and my breath caught because it was Anna, definitely Anna, though she looked thin and terrified and wrong, somehow like a photograph left too long in the sun. "Diego," her voice came from the mirror, thin and distant. "Diego, is that you? Can you hear me?" "Anna?" I moved closer to the mirror, my hands shaking. "What happened? Where are you?" "I don't know. I was on my way to visit my sister, and there was this old woman at the bus station. She said she knew you, said she had something to give you. Could I help her to her car? I thought she was your aunt or your grandmother. She seemed so frail. But when we got to her car, she grabbed my wrist and everything went dark and cold, and I've been here ever since, trapped in this space between the mirrors, able to see out sometimes, but never able to break through, never able to—" "When?" I interrupted. "When did this happen?" 2 months ago, September 25th. "I've been here for 2 months, Diego. Alone in the dark, watching the world through glass, and I can't touch anything. Can't make anyone hear me." September 25th. The same day Anna had gone missing, and Aunt Teresa had died October 12th, which meant my aunt had captured Anna more than 2 weeks before her death, had prepared the 7th mirror, had been ready to complete the ritual she'd failed at 37 years ago. She was going to finish it, I said to my mother, fury and horror warring in my chest. She was going to trap Anna permanently, complete the 7, and bring back her dead lover. Even after everything, even after you made her promise, she was still trying. "But she died before she could complete the final binding," my mother said, "which means Anna is caught in between, captured, but not fully bound, trapped, but potentially able to be freed. The ritual is incomplete in both directions." From the 6 filled mirrors came a sound, not words exactly, but a rising chorus of voices, the trapped souls responding to our presence, to the proximity of the 7th mirror. One of the figures, a young man with dark hair and hollow eyes, pressed his hands against the glass from inside. "Complete it," he said, and his voice was layered, echoing strangely. "Complete the ritual. 7 souls, 7 mirrors, and then we can all be released. That's what she promised us, that our sacrifice would be temporary, that once the spell was cast we could all move on, finish what she started." "But that's a lie," said another voice, this one female coming from a different mirror, where an old woman's face swam into view. "She never intended to release us. We were meant to be trapped forever, our souls fuel for a spell that would keep Mateo anchored to this world. Completing the ritual doesn't free us, it damns us eternally." "You don't know that," the young man shouted. "You're just afraid, just trying to maintain false hope. At least completion gives us purpose, gives our suffering meaning." The 6 souls began to argue, their voices rising and overlapping, 37 years of imprisonment, erupting into conflict. My mother grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the mirrors. "We need to decide," she said urgently. "The ritual is trying to complete itself. It has momentum, has been building for decades, and with all 7 mirrors finally in proximity, it's going to try to finish whether we help it or not. We can try to complete it, bind Anna fully, and hope the spell releases everyone. We can try to destroy the mirrors, though your aunt tried that for years and failed. Or I prompted. Or you can do what Teresa should have done from the beginning. You can try to free them, not through the ritual, but by breaking the bindings themselves. It's dangerous, probably impossible, but if it worked, all 7 souls could be released without completing the dark trade. How? A sacrifice, came a new voice, and I turned to see that Anna's face in my mirror had changed, become sharper, somehow more present. Not of a soul, but of potential. Someone has to anchor the breaking, has to provide enough life force to shatter 7 bindings simultaneously. It won't kill you, but it will take something. Years of your life, maybe, or your ability to see yourself reflected ever again, or your capacity for joy. Magic always takes what you'd most want to keep. I'll do it, I said immediately. Tell me how. Diego, no, my mother started, but I cut her off. She's been trapped for 2 months because my aunt was obsessed with something that died 40 years ago. These 6 have been trapped for 37 years because I interrupted a ritual. This ends now tonight, even if it costs me everything. Anna's face in the mirror softened with an expression that was pure love mixed with grief. The 7th mirror, your mirror, has to be placed in the empty alcove. You have to stand at the altar and speak the words of unbinding. They'll come to you when you need them. The mirrors will teach you because they want to be free. But Diego, you need to understand, if this works, I'll be released too. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if I come back to my body or if my body is gone after 2 months and I move on to whatever comes next. We might not. I know, I said, my voice thick. I know, but you deserve freedom. All of you do, whatever form that takes. I won't keep you prisoner to make myself feel better. I walked to the empty alcove and placed my mirror in it, the brass frame settling into grooves in the concrete as if it had been made for this exact spot. The 7 mirrors now formed a perfect circle, and the moment the 7th was in place, the temperature in the basement dropped so dramatically that frost formed instantly on every surface. The symbols on the floor began to glow, not with light, but with an absence of light, with darkness so complete it hurt to look at. And I felt it. Then felt the ritual trying to complete itself, felt 40 years of interrupted magic surging forward to finish what had been started. I stepped to the altar and placed both hands on its cold surface. The words came to me not in Spanish or English or any language I consciously knew, but I understood them, words of release, of breaking, of ending what should never have been begun. I spoke them, and with each syllable I felt something inside me being pulled away, not painfully, but inexorably, like blood being drawn, like years being peeled from my remaining life. The mirrors shattered. All 7 of them simultaneously, the glass exploding outward in a spray of glittering fragments that should have shredded us, but instead dissolved into light before they could land. 7 souls emerged from the broken frames, not as ghosts or shades, but as solid people, confused and blinking and real. Anna stumbled out of the alcove where my mirror had been and fell into my arms, solid and warm and alive. The other 6, young man, old woman, businessman, child, 2 others I barely glimpsed. All of them emerged and stood there looking at their hands, their bodies, as if they'd forgotten what it was like to be corporeal. "We're free," the old woman whispered. "After all this time, we're actually free." But the young man was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "What did you give up?" he asked. "What did the unbinding take from you?" I didn't know yet. Would probably not know for days, maybe weeks. But I could already feel it, an absence where something had been a gap in myself that might be lifespan, or might be the ability to fully trust my own senses, or might be something else entirely. The magic had taken its price. I just hadn't yet learned what currency it demanded. The 7 freed souls stood in the basement like people waking from a long dream, disoriented and uncertain. The young man who'd argued for completing the ritual was crying silently, his translucent form gradually solidifying with each passing second. The old woman with flowers in her hair, I could see now they were fresh roses blooming impossibly from her scalp, was touching the walls, the altar, her own face as if verifying reality through physical sensation. Anna clung to me, her body trembling with shock and relief, and I held her close, breathing in the smell of her hair that somehow remained familiar despite 2 months of impossible imprisonment. But even as I felt the joy of her return, I could sense it. The absence growing inside me, the price the magic had extracted, spreading through my consciousness like ink through water. "Diego," my mother said softly. And when I turned to look at her, I saw that she could see it too. Whatever had been taken written across my face in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. "What do you feel?" "I don't know, it's like—" I struggled to find words for something beyond language. "It's like a color I used to see is gone. Not blindness exactly, but a frequency I can't hear anymore. A sense I didn't know I had until it was removed." The child, who couldn't have been more than 10 when he'd been trapped, spoke up in a voice that held far too much age. "Reflection," he said simply. "He gave up his reflection. Look." He pointed to where shards of broken mirror still lay on the floor, and in those fragments I saw everyone's image reflected back: my mother, Anna, the 7 freed souls, but where I stood there was nothing. Empty space. I existed in 3 dimensions, but cast no image in glass or water or polished metal. "You'll never see yourself again," the child continued. "Not in mirrors, not in photographs, not in video. You exist only as others perceive you, never as you perceive yourself. That's what the unbinding required, the surrender of self-reflection, literal and metaphorical." I looked down at my hands, solid and real, then at the empty space where my reflection should have been in the broken glass. The child was right. I could feel it now, not a physical absence, but an existential one, as if some essential feedback loop had been severed. I would go through life unable to verify my own existence through reflected image, unable to check my appearance, unable to capture my image in any medium. "I can live with that," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it or if it was the only acceptable response. "If it means you're all free, I can live with that." "But can they?" my mother asked, gesturing to the 7 freed souls, and I saw what she meant. They were becoming more solid by the moment, but they weren't whole. The businessman's briefcase was translucent, flickering between states of matter. The old woman's roses were bleeding petals that dissolved before they hit the floor. They existed, yes, but not completely, not stably. "What's happening to them?" I asked. "The ritual was incomplete in both directions," my mother explained. "They were never fully bound, so they can't be fully released. They're caught in between, more real than reflections, but less real than living people. They're like echoes, made manifest shadows, given substance. They can't stay here in the living world. There's no place for them anymore." "Then where do they go?" Anna asked, her voice muffled against my chest. "Where all echoes go eventually," the old woman said, and her voice held acceptance rather than fear. "We fade. We diminish. We return to the silence from which we were pulled. It's not death. We're already dead, have been dead for decades. It's just completion. An ending that should have come 37 years ago." "How long?" I asked. "Days, maybe," the young man said. "Maybe only hours. The world will forget us gradually. We'll leave no records, no photographs, no proof we existed except in the memories of those who knew us. And even those memories will fade faster than normal, like dreams in morning light." "That's not fair," I protested. "You deserve better than that. You deserve to be remembered, to have your stories told, to—" "We were already forgotten," the businessman interrupted gently. "Teresa chose us specifically because we had no one who'd miss us, no connection strong enough to prompt serious investigation. We were invisible even before we were imprisoned. At least now we have a chance to make peace with what we lost, to spend our last hours as something more than trapped desperation." He smiled, and it was genuine. "You gave us that. You gave us the choice of how we end rather than eternal imprisonment. That's more than we ever thought we'd have." "But I'm different," Anna said, suddenly pulling away from me to look at the others. "I wasn't dead when I was trapped. I was captured, but I never died. My body was still alive somewhere waiting, which means I can go back, right? I can return to my life." The looks exchanged by the 6 dead souls told me the answer before anyone spoke. "Maybe," the child said carefully. "But you've been gone for 2 months. 2 months without food, without water. Even if you were sustained somehow by the mirror's magic, your body would have atrophied, would have suffered damage that—" "Where?" I demanded. Where would her body be if Aunt Teresa trapped her reflection, but her body survived? Where would she have put it? My mother's face went pale. "The hospital. Teresa had herself admitted to Hospital Metropolitano 3 days before she died. Said she was having chest pains, needed observation. She was there for 48 hours before she checked herself out, then died at home the next day." "If she had Anna during that time," I said, understanding dawning, "and she died without completing the ritual." "Anna's body could still be there," my mother finished. "In the hospital, probably in a coma, unresponsive and with no ID, no way to trace her identity." "She'd be in their long-term care ward, a Jane Doe no one could identify because my reflection was trapped in a mirror," Anna said. "The part of me that appears in records and cameras in any kind of documentation. Without that, I'd be invisible to the system, just another unconscious patient with no past." "We have to go there," I said immediately. "Now. If your body is still alive, you can return to it. The mirror that held you is broken, which means the binding is severed. You should be able to reunite with yourself." But Anna was shaking her head, her translucent form flickering. "I can feel it," she said. "I can feel my body calling to me, yes. But I can also feel how weak the connection is. 2 months in a coma, Diego, even if we find my body, even if I can return to it, who knows what damage has been done. I might never wake up. I might be trapped again, but this time in flesh instead of glass. We have to try." I took her hand, and though I could feel her fingers, they were cold, far colder than they should have been. "I didn't free you just to watch you fade. If there's any chance at all, we're taking it." The 7 of us climbed the stairs back to the main house, me, my mother Anna, and the 6 souls who'd been trapped longer than I'd been alive. They moved slowly as if gravity affected them differently, and I noticed that they cast no shadows despite the lights overhead, already fading, already slipping away from material existence. "We'll come with you," the old woman said as we reached the front door, "to the hospital. We've been prisoners so long we've forgotten what it's like to choose our own actions. Let us choose this to help save one life before we lose our own again." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell them they should spend their remaining time however they wished rather than helping us. But I saw the determination in their translucent faces and understood. They needed to believe their suffering had led to something good, that their sacrifice hadn't been meaningless. Helping save Anna was how they could give their own deaths purpose. The drive to Hospital Metropolitano was surreal. 9 of us crammed into my small sedan, 4 solid people and 5 increasingly transparent souls who took up space without quite having mass. The freed souls watched the city pass by with expressions of wonder and sorrow, seeing a world that had changed radically in the decades they'd been imprisoned. "There are so many lights," the child said, his face pressed to the window. "I don't remember there being so many lights." "Smartphones," the businessman said, watching people on the sidewalk, staring at glowing screens. "I've heard of those. We could hear things in the mirrors, sometimes conversations near reflective surfaces. Technology moved on without us." Rain continued to fall, turning the city into a blur of color and motion. It was nearly 11 p.m. now, late enough that traffic was thin and we made good time. I kept glancing at Anna in the passenger seat, watching her flicker between states of being, and each time she became more translucent, my heart clenched with fear that we were running out of time. "Tell me about the 2 months," I said, needing to hear her voice, needing to maintain the connection between us. "What was it like in the mirror?" "Dark," she said after a long pause. "Not completely. I could see out sometimes, like looking through water, but I couldn't make anyone see me. And there were others. Not the 6 souls, they were in different mirrors, but shadows, suggestions of other things that lived in the space between reflections, things that had never been human at all. She shuddered. They were curious about me, kept touching me, testing me as if they couldn't understand what I was doing in their realm. They weren't hostile exactly, but they weren't safe either. Like wild animals, neutral and less provoked, but always potentially dangerous. I learned to stay very still, very quiet, and most of the time they'd drift past without really noticing me. "I'm so sorry," I said. "If I'd known, if I'd had any idea what Aunt Teresa was planning." "You couldn't have known. No one could. She was dying and desperate and willing to do terrible things for one last chance at the impossible." Anna looked at her hands, watching them fade and solidify and fade again. "I almost understand it, actually. The lengths you'll go to when you're losing someone you love. Look at what you just did, gave up ever seeing your own face again just to free me. That's its own kind of madness." "That's different. I made a choice. She made choices for everyone else." "Maybe." Anna was quiet for a moment. "Diego, if we get to the hospital and my body is too far gone, if I can't return to it, or if returning means being trapped in a vegetative state, promise me you'll let me go." "Let me fade with the others. Don't keep hoping for something that can't happen." "I can't promise that. You have to. I need to know that one way or another this ends tonight. Either I return to my body and wake up, or I accept that this is how I end and I let go gracefully. No half measures, no eternal twilight. Promise me, Diego." I wanted to refuse, wanted to say that I'd fight for her no matter what, but I saw the fear beneath her determination and understood what she was really asking: for agency, for choice, for control over her own fate after 2 months of having no control at all. "I promise," I said finally. "Either you come back fully or you go peacefully. No half measures." We reached the hospital and parked in the visitor lot. The 7 freed souls followed us inside, drawing no attention despite their translucent forms, because I realized with a chill they weren't casting light in a way that cameras or security systems could detect. To any electronic monitoring, it would look like just 3 people entering me, my mother, an empty space where Anna and the others walked. "We need to find Jane Doe's admitted around September 25th, my mother said to the information desk attendant, a tired-looking woman in her 50s. "My niece went missing, and we think she might have been brought here." "Jane Doe's would be in long-term care, 4th floor, the attendant said, barely looking up from her phone. "But visiting hours are over. You'll have to come back tomorrow." "Please," Anna said, stepping forward, even though I knew the woman couldn't see her. "Please, I need to find my body. I need to go home." The attendant frowned as if she'd heard something but couldn't identify the source. "Did you—" She shook her head. "Never mind. Look, I really can't let you up without authorization. Hospital policy." That's when the young man who'd been trapped the longest stepped up to the desk. He placed his hand over the computer screen, and though his touch wasn't physical in the normal sense, something about it caused the screen to flicker and glitch. Patient records scrolled past impossibly fast, as if someone was hacking the system, and then stopped on a single entry. "Jane Doe admitted September 25th, the young man said, reading off the screen. 23 years old, unresponsive, no identification. Room 437. She's there. Anna, your body is there." The attendant was staring at her computer in confusion, trying to figure out why it was malfunctioning, and we took advantage of her distraction to slip past the desk and into the elevator. The 6 souls crowded in with us, their forms now so translucent I could see the elevator walls through them, and I knew we were running out of time in multiple ways. 4th floor. Long hallway, 2 bright fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic and suffering. Room 437 was at the far end, and as we walked toward it, I felt the weight of what we were about to attempt pressing down on me. This had to work. It had to. The room was private, a single bed with monitors beeping softly, showing steady vitals but no consciousness. And in that bed, connected to IV lines and feeding tubes, was Anna's body, thin, pale, but alive. Her face was the same one I'd kissed goodbye 2 months ago, though now it was slack empty, as if the animating force had been removed and only the shell remained. "That's me," Anna whispered, her translucent form staring at her physical self with an expression caught between hope and horror. "That's what I look like without my soul. Like a doll. Like something that was never quite finished being human." "You can return to it," the old woman with roses in her hair said gently. "We can feel it, the connection between your reflection and your form. It's strained but not broken. You just have to want it strongly enough." "What if it doesn't work? What if I get stuck in there, trapped in a body that won't wake up?" "Then at least you'll be together," the child said. "Body and soul, even if consciousness never returns. That's more wholeness than most people achieve, even when they're healthy." Anna looked at me, and I saw all her fear and hope and desperate need for this to be over, written in her flickering features. "Stay with me," she asked. "Every second," I promised. She approached her physical body slowly, and as she got closer, I saw the two forms beginning to resonate to align like images being superimposed. Anna's translucent hand reached out and touched her physical hand, and where they connected, light flared, not bright but profound, like watching two halves of something essential being reunited. "It hurts," Anna gasped, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, letting more of her incorporeal self overlap with her corporeal form. The light intensified, and I had to look away. It was so intense and private, like witnessing something sacred and terrible happening simultaneously. When I could look again, there was only one Anna, the physical one in the bed, still connected to monitors and IV lines. But her eyes were moving beneath closed lids, and her fingers twitched, and the monitors showed brain activity spiking in ways they hadn't for 2 months. "She's coming back," my mother breathed. "Diego, it's working." But the 6 freed souls were fading faster now, as if Anna's reunification was drawing on the same energy that kept them manifested. The young man was barely visible, just a suggestion of form in the air. The old woman's roses were dissolving petal by petal. "Thank you," I said to them, not knowing what else to say, how to express gratitude for a sacrifice they hadn't chosen, but were making anyway. "Thank you for holding on long enough to help her." "We were always going to fade," the businessman said, his voice distant now, coming from somewhere far away. "At least this way we fade knowing we mattered. That's all anyone really wants, to know they mattered to someone." One by one they disappeared. Not dramatically, not with any final words or gestures. They simply became too faint to perceive, and then they were gone, returned to whatever silence awaited souls who'd been kept from their proper rest for far too long. Anna's eyes opened. She blinked, confused, taking in the hospital room, the monitors, my mother and me standing beside her bed. Her hand moved to touch her face, her arms as if verifying her physical existence. "I'm back," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm really back. I can feel everything, the sheets, the IV needle, the too-cold air conditioning. I'm really back." "You're really back," I confirmed, taking her hand, feeling its warmth and solidity. "You're safe now. It's over." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite true. It would never be completely over. I'd carry the absence of my reflection for the rest of my life. Anna would carry the memory of 2 months in darkness, of things in the spaces between that weren't meant for human awareness. My mother would carry decades of guilt for not stopping Teresa sooner. And somewhere in the ruins of my aunt's house, 7 broken mirrors would remain as evidence of what we'd done, what had been sacrificed, what terrible price had been paid for freedom. Over the next week, Anna recovered physically faster than doctors could explain. She'd lost weight and muscle tone during her coma, but there was no brain damage, no organ failure, nothing that should have kept her unconscious. The hospital was baffled but grateful they had a Jane Doe who'd mysteriously awakened and could now identify herself, clearing space and resources they desperately needed. Her family was overjoyed if confused. How had she ended up in a hospital in Monterrey when she'd been on her way to Guadalajara? She told them she didn't remember that the entire 2 months was blank. And after consulting with neurologists who found nothing wrong, everyone eventually accepted it as one of those medical mysteries that sometimes happen. I didn't tell her what I'd learned in that week, the full extent of what I'd lost. It wasn't just that I cast no reflection, I also appeared in no photographs. When people tried to take pictures, including me, either the camera malfunctioned or I simply wasn't there in the resulting image. Video was the same. I existed only in direct perception, only in the immediate moment, and would leave no visual record of my existence for future generations. "You're becoming folklore," my mother said when I showed her the failed photographs. "A person who exists only in memory and story, never in documentation. Like a ghost, but in reverse." She wasn't wrong. I'd begun to notice other changes too. People seemed to forget me faster than they should, as if without the reinforcement of seeing my image, their memories couldn't hold on to me as tightly. Casual acquaintances forgot my name within days. Coworkers I'd known for years suddenly had trouble remembering if I'd been at meetings. "You're fading from the world," my mother said gently. "Not physically, you're not going to disappear like the sick souls, but your presence is becoming lighter, less impactful, as if you exist slightly sideways from everyone else. Is that permanent?" "I don't know. Magic always has unexpected consequences. Maybe it'll fade with time, or maybe you'll spend the rest of your life as someone people can never quite hold in their memory. Either way, you saved 7 people from eternal imprisonment. That has to count for something." It did count for something. I had to believe that. Even on the hard days when I looked at where my reflection should be and saw nothing, when I tried to take a photo with Anna and appeared as empty space beside her, when I felt myself becoming unmemorable, even to people I loved, even then I had to believe the price was worth it. 3 weeks after Anna's return, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, old and yellowed, showing a young woman and a handsome man standing together, both smiling. On the back, in handwriting I recognized as Aunt Teresa's, was a message dated 1 week before her death. "Diego, if you're reading this, you've already found the mirrors. You've probably freed the souls I trapped, maybe even paid a price I never intended you to pay. I'm sorrier than you can know. I was 28 when Mateo died, and I spent the next 40 years trying to undo that one terrible moment. I became a monster because I couldn't accept loss, couldn't accept that love sometimes ends and there's nothing you can do about it except grieve and move forward. I captured Anna because she looked like I did at her age, young, in love with her whole life ahead of her. I convinced myself I was saving her from the pain I'd experienced, that by trading her future for Mateo's past I was doing something noble. But I know now I was just a dying woman desperately trying to complete something she should have abandoned decades ago. The 7th mirror was always meant for you, but not the way I planned. I wanted you to complete the ritual, to finish what I couldn't. But if you're reading this, you chose something better. You chose to break the cycle rather than perpetuate it. That takes a kind of courage I never had. I'm leaving you everything, the house, what little money remains, all of it. Not as payment for what you've lost, but as acknowledgement that you've done what I couldn't. You've ended a curse that should never have been started. Burn it all if you want. Sell it. Do whatever helps you heal. Just please understand that I loved Mateo, but that love made me cruel. And I'm sorry you had to pay for my cruelty. Forgive an old woman's desperate love if you can. And if you can't, at least know that in the end you were stronger than I ever was. Teresa. I read the letter 3 times, trying to find anger or resentment, trying to feel something other than the hollow sadness that had settled in my chest. Aunt Teresa had been a monster, yes, but she'd also been human, broken by grief, twisted by longing, unable to let go of something that had ended long ago. In a different life with different choices, she might have been someone worth knowing. I burned the photograph and the letter that night, watching the paper curl and blacken in my kitchen sink. The flames consumed Teresa's words and the image of her long-lost love, reducing 40 years of obsession to ash. The ashes went down the drain with cold water, and I told myself it was finished. But that night I dreamed. In the dream, I stood in Aunt Teresa's basement, and the 7 alcoves were empty. No broken mirrors, no trapped souls, just empty spaces carved into concrete. But on the wall opposite, where there should have been nothing, was a new mirror larger than the others with a frame of dark wood instead of brass. I walked toward it, and as I approached, I saw that it reflected the basement perfectly except for one thing. I was visible in it. For the first time since the unbinding, I could see myself clearly, every detail sharp and present. "That's your true reflection," a voice said, and I turned to see the dark-haired woman who'd been trapped in one of the 6 mirrors. But she wasn't translucent anymore. She was solid, real, more present than she'd been even when she'd first been freed. "You're still here," I said. "I thought you'd faded with the others." "I chose differently," she said. "They went on to whatever comes next, accepted their ending. But I chose to stay in the space between to watch over this place and ensure the ritual can never be performed again. Someone has to guard the threshold, and I'm willing to be that someone. Why? Because I understand now what Teresa couldn't. Love doesn't conquer death. Magic doesn't undo loss. But sacrifice can have meaning if you choose it freely. You taught me that when you gave up your reflection to free us, you showed me that some prices are worth paying if they protect others from the same suffering." She gestured to the mirror on the wall. "This is your reflection now, not in the living world, but in the space between. Here you exist fully. Here you can see yourself for who you really are." I looked at my reflection again, and this time I saw not just my physical form, but something more. The absence where my self-image used to be, the lightness that made me forgettable, the price I'd paid rendered visible in ways the waking world could never show. "Will it always be like this?" I asked. "Will I spend the rest of my life barely remembered existing in the margins?" "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe over time people will find other ways to hold on to you, through stories, through the way you make them feel, through connections that don't rely on visual memory. Humans are adaptable. They'll find ways to know you even if they can't quite remember you." "And what about you? How long will you stay here guarding this place?" "As long as necessary. Time works differently in the between space. What feels like years to you might be moments to me, or the reverse. But I'll be here watching, making sure no one else makes Teresa's mistake." She smiled, and it was the same genuine smile I'd seen in the basement, the expression of someone who'd found purpose in unexpected ways. "Go back to your life, Diego. Love Ana. Let yourself be forgotten by strangers if that's the price, but never forget yourself. Never lose sight of who you are, even if mirrors can't show you anymore. That's how you keep the sacrifice meaningful." I woke to darkness and the sound of rain against my window, Ana sleeping peacefully beside me in my too small bed. We'd moved in together the week after she'd been released from the hospital, neither of us willing to sleep alone anymore after what we'd been through. She stirred as I sat up, reaching out sleepily to touch my arm. "Bad dream?" she asked. "No," I said, and realized it was true. "Not bad, just strange. I think Aunt Teresa's guardian spirit was giving me advice." "About what?" "About how to live with what I've lost." Ana was quiet for a moment then. "Can I tell you something I've been noticing, that when I describe you to people, they forget within minutes. But when I describe how you make me feel, they remember that perfectly. They can't recall your face or your voice, but they remember that you're kind, that you're brave, that you gave up something essential to save people you didn't know. You're becoming a story instead of a person, and maybe that's not entirely bad. Stories fade too," I pointed out. "But they fade slower than memory, and they get passed on, transformed, kept alive in ways photographs never could. Maybe you're not disappearing, maybe you're just changing into something different, something more essential than visual documentation." I lay back down beside her, thinking about the dark-haired woman in the between space, about the 6 souls who'd faded to silence, about Aunt Teresa's desperate love and terrible choices. All of them had become stories, now cautionary tales, lessons in what happens when you can't let go, when you try to control forces beyond comprehension. And maybe I was becoming a story too, not the kind that gets written in history books or captured in photographs, but the kind that gets whispered late at night, that gets told around tables when people talk about mysteries and sacrifices and the prices we pay for love. I can live with that, I said to Anna, meaning it this time without reservation. I can live with being a story instead of a face. She kissed me then, and I felt her warmth and solidity, felt the reality of her presence in ways that had nothing to do with reflection or documentation. We existed together in that moment, present and real and alive, and that was enough. That had to be enough. But sometimes late at night when Anna is asleep and I'm alone with my thoughts, I'll pass by a window or a turned-off screen and I'll see it not my reflection, but something else, something watching from the other side of the glass. A shadow that's too tall, with proportions that aren't quite right, with eyes that hold recognition and patience in equal measure. The woman in the between space said she'd guard the threshold, but I wonder sometimes if what she's really guarding is me making sure that what I gave up doesn't try to come back, doesn't try to reclaim what was sacrificed. Because magic always wants to balance itself, and a reflection surrendered is a door left open, an invitation for something to fill the space where my image used to be. I don't look directly at those shadows. I've learned not to acknowledge them, not to give them the power of recognition, but I know they're there patient and still waiting for something I can't quite name. Aunt Teresa's house burned down a month after the unbinding. Electrical fire, the investigator said, probably faulty wiring in a house that had gone too long without proper maintenance. Nothing survived, not the 14 covered mirrors, not the basement with its painted symbols, not any evidence of what had been done there over 4 decades. My mother and I were the only ones at the small memorial service. We stood in the rain, watching smoke rise from the ruins, and neither of us felt much like grieving. The house had needed to burn. Some places hold too much darkness, too much pain, and they need to be destroyed so the darkness can't spread. "Do you think it's really over?" I asked my mother. She was quiet for a long time, rain running down her face, making her look older than her 60 years. "I think some things are never really over. They just change shape, move to different places, wait for different times. But I think we ended this particular chapter. What comes next, that's a different story." She was right, of course. Life went on. Anna returned to work, her co-workers accepting her reappearance with the adaptability of people who'd rather believe convenient lies than uncomfortable truths. I continued my IT job, growing used to being the employee people could never quite remember, but whose work was consistently excellent. My mother sold what remained of Teresa's estate and donated the money to organizations that help victims of domestic violence, saying that at least some good could come from all that suffering. And in the darkness behind every reflective surface in the space between glass and backing in the threshold, where light bends and reality grows thin, the woman with dark hair stands guard, watching, waiting, ensuring that what was broken stays broken and what was ended stays ended. Sometimes I think about the 6 souls who faded, about whether they found peace or simply ceased to exist. Sometimes I wonder if they're with Mateo now, all of them together in whatever afterlife awaits those who've been caught between worlds. Sometimes I hope that Teresa is there too, finally reunited with her lost love, finally free of the obsession that consumed her living years. But mostly I try not to think about it at all. I try to focus on the present, on Anna's laugh, on my mother's rare smiles, on the small victories of ordinary days. I try to be more than the price I paid, more than the absence where my reflection should be. I try to be someone worth remembering, even if I exist only in memory and never in mirrors. That's all any of us can do, really live in ways that make us unforgettable, even when our images fade, love in ways that transcend documentation, sacrifice in ways that give meaning to the time we have. The mirror stays wrapped in its dark cloth, hidden in a locked box in the back of my closet. I tell myself I keep it as a reminder, a warning insurance against forgetting what was lost and what was gained. But some nights when I can't sleep and Anna is beside me breathing softly, I hear it calling not with words, but with the memory of what I used to be, with the possibility of reclaiming what I surrendered. I never answer. I never will, because I learned what Aunt Teresa never could. Some doors once opened should stay closed. Some prices once paid shouldn't be refunded. Some sacrifices give meaning to everything that comes after, and that meaning is worth more than any reflection, any image, any documentation of existence. I am Diego Castellanos. I am 25 years old. I work in IT support and live in a small apartment in Monterrey with the woman I love. I exist only in memory and story, invisible to cameras and mirrors, fading from the consciousness of strangers, even as I stand before them. And I am at peace with that, mostly.